Our bill is aimed at leveraging America's influence and conditioning our vote at any of the international financial institutions for Nicaragua until the leadership in that country takes significant steps to restore democratic order. I think that we would all agree, as members of the United States Congress, that to have democracies in our region is beneficial, and to have strong governance and strong rule of law and a strong independent judiciary. These are all values that we share, and that we, the people throughout the hemisphere, would like to have that in their countries as well. So let's go over just briefly what are some of the conditions in this bill. And please, as I go through them, ask yourself, is that a damaging condition, or is that something that would help the people? Not whether it helps the ruling class, the rich guys, the fat cat bankers, not whether it helps the regime or the government in power, whether it helps the people of those countries. So let me go through the list, Mr. Speaker. This bill has as conditions to promote democracy. Promoting democracy, promoting an independent judicial system. Those are wonderful values. Promoting an independent electoral council so that the ruling party doesn't steal elections. Strengthen the rule of law so that you don't have corrupt judges deciding in favor of the rich guys and against the poor of the country. Fighting corruption, including investigating and persecuting government officials who are credibly alleged to be corrupt, who go against the people. What else does the bill do? Well, one of the conditions is that it protects the right of political opposition parties. Don't we want that? Political opposition parties, journalists who are trying to get the truth to the Nicaraguan people, just as they do here to the American people. Nicaragua continues to offer its unconditional support to Nicolás Maduro and his dictatorial regime in Venezuela. And according to congressional testimony, Venezuela's entity, PDVSA, has also used its subsidiary in Nicaragua, which is called Albaniza, and I'll give the exact letters of those names, to launder money. So, Mr. Speaker, if Venezuela's Maduro is using Nicaragua in order to evade U.S. sanctions, we need to take a closer look at these ties. We need to hold people accountable, because all of that hurts the people of Venezuela and the people of Nicaragua. It helps the government, but it doesn't help the people. And that is what this bill does. We want to hold the Nicaraguan government accountable, just like we've done in other countries. As I said, in Central America, this is not something new out of whole cloth that we've invented. It has worked, and it has truly helped the people. Now, earlier this year, Mr. Cyrus and I, we traveled to Honduras, we traveled to Guatemala, and we saw firsthand how conditioning our support for these countries works and has been extremely effective. Has it hurt those countries? It has not. It has worked. It has strengthened their democracy. It has strengthened the rule of law, the independent judiciary. So placing conditions incentivizes country to do the right thing, and it makes institutional reforms as needed to improve the livelihood of their citizens. So I know that the Nicaraguan government does not like this bill, but I tell you, Mr. Speaker, the people of Nicaragua would like to know that the United States Congress stands with them as they call for reforms that promote democracy, that strengthen the rule of law, that fight corruption, and that protects the right of all political opposition parties. And that's exactly what this bill does. Mr. Speaker, I met with Victor Cuadras and Zaida Hernandez, two young Nicaraguan student leaders who bravely protest the abuses and violence of the Ortega regime, knowing that they could face trumped-up charges upon their return to Nicaragua. Victor and Zaida feel a unique sense of responsibility to come here to Washington to advocate for justice and liberty for their homeland. They represent the voice of the Nicaraguan people, old and new generations, who desire nothing more than a free and democratic country where one can be prosperous and live without fear of repression. What a concept. And we must listen to their pleas, Mr. Speaker. Countless of Nicaraguans are on the front lines, as you can see on this poster, confronting the brutality of the Ortega regime day after day. Over 120 Nicaraguans and one U.S. citizen have been killed at the hands of this murderous regime in just the past weeks. Over 1,000 Nicaraguans have been injured. Hundreds continue to disappear. Mr. Speaker, I was on the floor yesterday, and here I am again for the fourth time since the regime's crackdown on the Nicaraguan people began on April 18th, because I believe that it is vital now more than ever for the United States to support the people of Nicaragua in its fight to reestablish democratic order. We must let the people know that they are not alone. Earlier this week, I was joined by Republicans and Democrats, representatives and senators in urging the administration to sanction two of Ortega's many thugs. Francisco Lopez, head of Albaniza, for laundering and corruption. Francisco Diaz, who heads the National Police, for orchestrating and the repression and the killings of Nicaraguans. But there are so many others that must be sanctioned, including Gustavo Porras, head of the National Assembly, Sonia Castro, Minister of Health, Roberto Lopez, president of the Social Security Institute, and Tirso Celedon, a real estate developer profiting from the Social Security Institute. Each of these individuals is part of Ortega's inner circle and is responsible for those acts of corruption and human rights violations, all of which have been widely reported. I urge the administration to not delay any longer and to take swift action to freeze assets, to cancel visa, and to sanction to the full extent of our laws those who are responsible for so much corruption and so many murders in Nicaragua.
Desinformación, capitalización del desgobierno.